Warning, this video will contain blatant spoilers, so please don't watch this if you haven't seen the Amazing Digital Circus Last Act movie in theaters, or you're waiting to watch it when it releases on YouTube. Secondly, I'm not a reviewer in any capacity whatsoever, and this is all my opinion, so please don't get upset. Thirdly, I've been following the series since its initial teaser trailers, but I haven't been keeping up with background productions and tweets from the creator and things like that, so I might be missing vital info that other people more invested in the series might have. Alright, with that out of the way, we're good to get into the reaction and review of the Amazing Digital Circus, The Last Act. Before getting into the meat of the film itself, I thought it would be interesting to talk about my background before seeing this film and the theater experience as a whole, as I believe they both add to my overall feelings concerning the film. I've been following Gooseworks for a long time now, and I think the first project I ever saw from them was their covers they did for the Undertale songs around 2016, which, geez, was 10 years ago. I think I specifically remember liking the Metal Crusher cover because, I don't know, I was a weird kid. I tried mimicking the hand motions that Mettaton was doing in the video. And now that I'm looking through her catalog of videos more closely, I think I might even seen her work much earlier with the Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 covers she has on there. But all in all, her work has always impressed me, and there's no doubt in my mind that Gooseworks is a very talented artist in many ways. I'm super happy to see that her hard work over the years has paid off in such a big way with the Amazing Digital Circus. Looking back on it too, I've noticed on some of her accounts that she's posted covers of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure songs from the anime, as well as drawn a lot of pictures. I didn't even know JoJo's Bizarre Adventure existed at the time. It's kind of a weird feeling, but at least it's good to know she has good taste. Also contributing to the show, I suppose, is the sponsors Glitch Productions. I'm not going to talk much about them. I'm not going to talk about that at all. They're cool for supporting indie artists, but don't think I've forgotten what you've made. As I stated previously, I've been watching the Amazing Digital Circus since its first public teaser in January of 2023. I don't recall my initial reactions to seeing the teaser trailer, but it obviously encapsulated me since I'm here making this video. I've enjoyed the series on the sideline for every release and watched it through multiple times, though I've kept a wide berth between me and the fan base. I made this video before I heard, or at least I started production on this video before I heard a lot of the toxicity floating around the fan base, so just know I've been relatively hands-off and I don't know anything about that. Most of my exposure to the series outside of the main episodes are memes I've seen about like the Amazing Digital content farms and the horrors that result from them. And it's hard to avoid the series anyway due to the insane popularity it's received online. In fact, I just went and checked, and it has over 440 million views on the pilot alone. That's insane. I already know Glitch Productions is rolling in that dough, especially with those stupid crummy blind boxes they stick at the end of every video. Wish they'd send me some of that money. Anyways, going into the theater experience, I didn't have any spoilers. The series itself was fresh in my mind since I did a watch through of every episode with my sister leading up to the movie release. We actually decided to go on opening night, which was pretty exciting because the theater was absolutely packed with people who were all excited to see the same piece of media. In fact, we barely got seats and had to sit near the front where you have to creak your neck a little bit just to see properly. It was a little brutal, but we made it work. And you know, best of all, the theater didn't stink. At least we weren't next to people who haven't showered in 2 weeks, so maybe we just lucked out. Speaking of the theater audience, they were pretty awesome, with no one being disrespectful, like with the Minecraft movie. And some people, even like this one little girl and her brother, were dressed up as like Jax and Ragatha, which they were in a pretty good costume. I was impressed. A lot of people were carrying around little nerdy plushies, and one girl even had like a little, what do you call those, art mannequins with her? And yes, people were dressed like nerds with like all the Glitch merch and probably bootleg t-shirts you could ever imagine. But I was also there watching a movie called The Amazing Digital Circus, and I did take pictures in front of the cardboard cutout of the theater. Nobody cares, everybody's cringe here, so everybody wins. Going into the film itself, it opens up with some advice from the poorly animated Oni Plays Fish in the style of Garther's Pond, telling us not to spoil the movie. Obviously, I've ignored his advice, but he did get a shocked chuckle out of my sister when he began trauma dumping about him not having an afterlife. And right away, I don't appreciate them bringing Kane in to give a recap of the series. As if everyone who wanted to be in the theater didn't already know everything there was to know already. All this really did was pad the runtime, which was pretty disappointingly low already. And at around 1 hour of content, if you exclude episode 8, it's kind of brutal. They just tacked it on to the beginning to make it feel like a full film. I'm talking about episode 8 now, sorry. And shamelessly, Glitch also jokes about this fact by having Kane say we're about to watch something that was released for free months ago. I'll get more into this later, but this film would have definitely benefited from either being longer or having parts of it split into separate episodes beforehand. You'll begin to see me develop a theme of the last act being rushed as we go on here. Episode 9 opens up with a cold opening rehash of the pilot, just with Kane being dead and all. And I love this, especially as Pomni takes the place of the abstracted Kaufmo. The music was growing pretty drab, or at least growing distorted as the drab setting the characters were left in after episode 8 fades in. Immediately, of course, Jax flips the heck out, which I suppose is understandable, since the only world they had at the moment is collapsing. But nobody else seemed to lash out at Kinger, and it becomes less understandable when you consider that Kinger, had to do something, because the only alternative they had was eternal torture, until they abstracted. Also, I'm not a Jax hater, but everyone in the circus knew they were able to conjure objects on their own at that point. So Jax doesn't really need to freak out because they can just recreate the circus. It wasn't hidden knowledge or anything. Even a few minutes into the film, we were given the bombshell reveal that none of the characters are actually real humans. They're essentially revealed to just be these digital meat puppets injected with a small file that contains the essence of the real people they're based on. I really don't know how to feel about this. As though it's tragic, I feel as if it would have been even worse to know that they actually are real people and their whole lives have been ruined by being taken into the circus. I know we're attached to the characters, but part of the tragedy and why we sympathize with the characters at all was because they were real people trapped in a reality they couldn't escape. Now we know they're just digital figments on a computer and the actual human beings are out there living their lives. This would have been a better reveal to me, in my opinion, if we were given longer than a few short minutes to see the characters act distraught and walk off. Because of the short runtime of the movie, we don't get to dwell and see just how deeply each character in the circus is impacted, because we need to move on to the next scene to make more time. Or to make the time, I suppose. Imagine if we got an episode before dedicated to seeing each of the characters hiding and processing the traumatic news they've just been given, which we only see a glimpse of with sad, mopey characters as Kinger teaches Pomni how to conjure objects in the circus. Speaking of Pomni and Kinger, they're the most persevering characters, with Kinger getting to work immediately and Pomni catching up to him. They have a little heartfelt scene where Pomni opens up about how she feels she's an idiot for ever trying, as she seems to have made everything worse for everyone. This leads into one of the lessons the movie is trying to get to, I think, where my Chad Kinger comforts Pomni with the message that even though bad things may result from us trying to do good for others, it matters that we even tried to help our fellow man in the first place. Furthermore, others may push us away and make us feel like they don't want us, but our actions have more impacts upon them that we don't see. So we should keep trying to help others, and we should especially try to do it with help from others and not alone. Perfect message that we will see Pomni put to use when she deals with Jax later in the film. Afterwards, Pomni and Kinger slowly rebuild parts of the circus, with characters finding motivation from their actions and joining along with time. The sequence is done really well, thinking back on it, with the whole thing being put to the backing of what I believe to be an original piano vocal piece titled Too Much For You. Never heard it before, and thought it was a little cheesy, but it does the job. Might be interesting to see how the choice of piano song plays into Jax's character as he plays the piano, but I'm not seeing anything major stand out at the moment. Shows a nice narrative of resilience in bad places because of companionship, and it's especially nice to see it likely took a long time as the stars appear to go by quickly, though I wish this could have been a major part, in its own episode. While all the other characters are hanging out, however, Jax keeps his distance from the group. Though he watches from afar, I think it's important to note that nobody from the group actually ever reaches out to him. Yes, he left the group in a fit of venom, but we'll see that the movie cautions against leaving these kind of people to their own devices. Jax is even shown trying to reach out to Pomni once on his own, but she doesn't promote his behavior and only watches him as he walks away. This reminds me of the idea that some situations are more unbearable for some than others, so we can't just go on and hope that people will save themselves willingly, the same way that you can pull yourself up, like by your bootstraps, I guess. And Jax did not save himself, as, what do you know, he abstracts off screen. This is one of my biggest gripes with the movie, as previous deaths, including Kane and some of the abstractions, were not treated lightly previously. Kaufmo gets a huge part of the pilot, and Jax's near abstraction takes up a huge part of episode 8. But here in the movie, which is the last major media we'll see of these characters, by the way, Jax just abstracts off screen with no fanfare. You know, if subtraction is a point of no return, like as a result of despair, then we should have gotten to see this despair instead of him acting moody off in the distance. It doesn't help that the characters kind of have a meh reaction to his abstraction. We don't see Kinger's reaction. Gangle is upset that she can't cry. You know, it'd be interesting. Let's see why, right? Show us more to see why Gangle, who has been bullied by Jax for so long, would want to cry for Jax. Let us see more of it instead of glossing over it. I just wish it had its own episode. I don't know. Again, this movie was rushed, or at least not given enough time to build up for payoff and emotional scenes. I understand Goose works as an amateur writer, but doesn't mean what she has written is totally all bad. I've enjoyed this series, cringy dialogue and all, and I've enjoyed this film, but I just can't shake the feeling you need to cook this cake a little longer. Take the emotional scene between Ragatha and Pomni, for example. Ragatha confides in Pomni with lots of tears, you know, that she just wanted to be present for Jax, makes him feel like he's not alone. She doesn't want anybody to abstract, and thematically it's nice. It feeds into the idea of trying to be there for others, but it's rushed. We're supposed to feel really emotional as Pomni and Ragatha tear up together, but there wasn't enough build-up for me to feel fully invested, and so the interaction just falls flat. Even my sister was dumbstruck, like in a bad way, upon seeing the two characters hug each other. With what's almost a sort of romantic tension, it's really bizarre and it feels forced to like a comedic level, and it just doesn't work. What makes it weirder is when Pomni says Ragatha is her closest friend in the circus. I understand Ragatha has tried to look out for you. We can assume more interactions happen silently in the background, like what we saw with the character awards, but it feels like a stretch without us getting an episode that focuses perhaps more on Ragatha. I don't think the pilot or small conversations in other episodes was enough of an establishment between the two characters to really justify the scene. And what about Kinger? Pomni literally had almost an entire episode where she was alone with Kinger, and Kinger would be Ragatha's best friend, if anything, if looking at both sides of the relationship. King and Ragatha have been with each other the longest, and they're always seen with one another in Jax's flashbacks later in the film. The cinematography is all there for the emotion of the scene to work, but it just can't, given the circumstances of the movie. It doesn't help that this is essentially the last major thing Ragatha does for the rest of the film, besides being a flashback later on. And that's another problem. I like all the characters presented to us in the Amazing Digital Circus. I understand Pomni and Jax are supposed to be the main characters, but there's so much left to be desired from the rest of the cast that isn't satisfied by the movie. As we get into it, the Jax plotline takes up almost the entire film, which would have been fine if the film itself wasn't so short, and the ending taken up by the return of someone who should have stayed dead. Moving on to the Jax plotline itself. Pomni approaches him in the door hallway, pulls a gun on him, got a chuckle out of me and my sister. After shooting out the lights, Pomni's able to enter Jax's mindscape even though he's abstracted. This raises a few questions that won't be answered. Like, how does Pomni know she's able to do this? It's nice if you think of it metaphorically, like she's reaching out to him even if it might hurt her or it won't help. But it's irrational given everything we know about abstractions up to this point. It could have helped if we had a scene of her mulling it over beforehand. And secondly, if Pomni is able to do this now, then later in the film when the other abstractions seem to be pacified in a large aquarium, why doesn't anybody else try this? We'll see that Jax perhaps didn't forgive himself or want to be saved, but it might not be the case with everyone else. Plus, the main circus characters don't have to worry about abstracting themselves by touch. Or proxy, I should say, because Kane can just snap it away at the end. It's baffling. Anyways, inside of Jax, there's this sort of inside-out type arrangement with many different doors representing hyperbolized aspects of Jax's outward personas. We're treated to a different scenario along with each persona, which someone different in the circus has abstracted. In the first door, we perhaps get to see how much Ragatha truly meant to Jax, because when she's gone, Jax just goes all out on his uncaring persona. He unsettlingly chokes Pomni out in a way I'd describe similar to Shinji in the end of Evangelion. Very unsettling and well done scene, to the point where I wonder what the unknowing parents thought who brought their children to the theater. Like, what are they thinking? Also, as a side note, there were tons of little kids who I thought this film would be too much for at attending the theater. Ideally, I could see myself loving this series if I was a middle schooler. Like, I think back to when I was in middle school, I was like obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's. I couldn't even imagine how much hype a series like this would have had back then. In the second door, Zubul has extracted this time, and Gangle has donned the manic happy mask as a coping mechanism, bossing everyone around to help set up for Zubul's funeral. I see this perhaps as a warning against masking grief with nothing but happiness. Jax shows up again, but this time in a freaky maid dress, and he gets lots. Him showing up in the maid dress did get a lot of comments and jeers from the theater. Jax is here trying to lean into an attempt to act like he doesn't care about wearing feminine things, and does so as a joke because he's just so masculine. Gangle calls him out, and what I weirdly notice in this film, and it'll happen a lot, is that the characters end up blushing, like in a way they never did any other episode in the series. Gangle blushes profusely as Jax tells her to come over to his room for what's implied to be sex. I guess, bro. I don't know. I guess Jax likes Gangle, which makes sense in the context of the series, you know, always picking on her and stuff. But it's still shocking to see it portrayed this way. Nobody was expecting it. The third door is not very impactful. Gangle abstracts. Jax goes full on in his comedy persona. He literally acts like Bugs Bunny with Zubul. It was fun and animated well, but I think it's just a gag. In the fourth door, I believe it's meant to be the part of Jax we see that bridges the gap to his vulnerable side. Like with the gun episode with Pomni, though it's locked up and forced to play the piano for the other Jax personalities who are taking turns belittling him. I think it's a nice touch how the personalities that are meant to hide who Jax is constantly clash with one another and aren't cohesive. I got some shocked laughs from the theaters as not me personally, but I heard some. As the feminine Jax calls reality gay and that women need to stop prying into the lives of men. I just thought of it now, but it's also pretty cool that the fake personalities are the ones playing a game amongst themselves. Like they're ones putting on the charade or something. Once Pomni gets the key to the real Jax's door, we're shown a bizarre sequence of flashback cuts for Jax before entering the circus, and his time before Pomni arrives. Jax is shown to have been homeless, which breathes a whole bunch of life into why he was panicking to leave the circus in episode 7. Once Jax enters the circus, we get to see that he really didn't take it well at all, much worse than even Pomni. We're shown a lot about Ribbit, who up until this point in the series was referenced, I want to guess, like around 3 times. Also, Kaufmo is shown, and I don't know if I wanted him to sound like goofy or something, but he just sounds like a regular dude, which was jarring to me. Ribbit is shown to be the source of comfort for Jax in the circus, being so overwhelmingly good towards him that it makes Jax's actions especially detestable when we see it in the future. We get to see them get along more and more with time, and we get a weirdly tense scene in Ribbit's bedroom. She lets it be known that she trusts him and wants him to have someone he can finally trust in the circus, which would be huge because in the story, I don't think Jax has ever had anybody he can trust in his life outside the circus. It's revealed that he had a harsh absentee father, and then after his father left, Jax's mother made him feel like he was never enough of a good person or never enough of a man. I know masculinity is a huge problem for Jax that he's been like juggling around and avoiding throughout the series, and it's satisfying to see why he has these problems, as you know he was traumatized as a child trying to be manly enough for the people he loved. I didn't catch up on this when watching the movie, and only learned about it from another viewer later on. But it's heavily implied that the issue Jax opened up to his mother about was his personal identity, specifically his gender identity. This makes more sense looking back on it, why Ribbit said she understood him and placed her ribbon in his hair. I thought he was blushing because it was, like in a romance movie where one character places a flower in the other's hair. Especially since they were in a very particular environment. But it was because Jax just secretly wants to express himself more openly, I suppose. Now, even knowing that Jax has been conditioned to be horrible at expressing his feelings towards others, it still hurts seeing him feel like he overshared to Ribbit, especially when he begins pushing her away. I don't understand if he would have just left it at, please don't talk about what happened, in this room, and conducted himself normally afterwards, but Jax took the nuclear option. He becomes irrational, which is the point, but it almost feels a little unrealistic for him to overnight, just set himself on destroying the only trusting friendship he would have ever had in his life up to this point. Also, Kaufmo's just a moron for not stepping in. Like, he's just like, huh? What? Have you seen Ribbit? I don't know. Doesn't feel like a real human. I don't know what I'm supposed to say about the snowy mountain scene. It's so inhuman and unreasonable, beyond any kind of skewed logic. I just kind of sat there and watched it without really knowing what to say or think. All I can say is that perhaps Ribbit is supposed to be an example of someone reaching out and being hurt themselves, but to the extreme, which is an outcome in life, I suppose. At least Gooseworks did a good job of getting me to detest Jax, using a character that was only introduced for real in the final episode. Eventually, Jax moves towards hanging out with Ragatha instead of Ribbit, to avoid Ribbit, which shows a pattern of behavior he would adopt going onwards, as he would then go on to push Ragatha away as well once she tried to care about him or ask about his feelings. He does the same to Kaufmo, and Kaufmo extends an offer to talk, and he ends up finding a new plaything to attach himself to with Gangle, not even letting Gangle choose her own name. Now we move on to the best part of the movie by far. I don't want to be too negative, as I do really enjoy this series and I love most of what's been done with it. However, I find the more that I like something, the more I end up caring about it. And so I apologize if I've been too harsh towards the film. This is the part of the movie I can appreciate all the way through, which is funny, it adds to my point of the series, that the series would have benefited from having more episodes, because Jax got tons of screen time in this movie dedicated to exploring him and his relationships, and it turned out to be the best part of the film. Imagine if all the characters got this treatment. Imagine if Ragatha got this treatment. Ragatha just got sidelined in this movie. Anyways, Pomni is in a void with a low water floor. Think of it like a pitch black version of that one arena you fight Dark Link in Ocarina of Time. The art design here is great, especially with the footsteps and teardrops leaving glowing ripples in the water. Pomni and Jax have a back and forth, with Jax questioning how Pomni could want to love and forgive him after all the horrible things he's done. And that's a good question that many people ask in their lives. However, we don't need to persist as our mistakes or force others to shun us, is what this scene is getting at. After all, we're not hardwired chat GPT robots. We don't follow a strict logic. We're humans capable of love, and love is radical. Love is a radical force. So yeah, Jax keeps trying to shoo Pomni away, saying she's making it harder. And it's at this point where I began to question my perception of what abstraction is supposed to be. Up to this point in the series, I've just kind of assumed that abstraction is supposed to be equivalent to death, specifically suicide. Because it's like the point where the characters are in such despair, they can't take it anymore and they reach a breaking point. And the fact that the other characters even held funerals seems to imply that they see abstraction as death as well. However, here Jax is tearfully, he doesn't want to go, which implies that he's fully conscious. And since he was already abstracted, that it's possible to reach out to those who are abstracted like Pomni did and comfort them. Which leads me to believe that abstraction isn't suicide, but instead an alternative state of life in which someone is totally cut off and incapable of interacting or sharing humanity with others. I don't want to go doesn't mean I don't want to die. You know, Jax is actually saying I don't want to lose the relationship we built together. Well, after some more dry heaving and hugging between Jax and Pomni, some flashbangs go off, you know, that were just left on the floor for some reason, resulting in extreme light engulfing Jax's whole body. This is the best scene in the movie, and I'll say being in the theater definitely has its charms. Kane's song in episode 8, I didn't talk about it, I skipped over episode 8, but it really popped out with the theater speakers, and the blinding light accompanied by the rumbling theater really left an impression on me. The cinematography choice, in my opinion, was just perfect, and it was in contrast to the other emotional scenes in the movie because I actually felt something. We're exposed to a slideshow of scenes with Pomni and Jax from throughout the series, which initially made me think the lyrics, which were just the first verse, from what I remember, were talking about Pomni being a positive impact in Jax's life in the circus. However, thinking back on it, it's more likely that the song is meant to be Jax attempting to embrace his identity with Pomni, just accepting him as he is, or better yet, both interpretations are actually correct. This is all especially powerful imagery as Pomni is seen screaming in what I can only assume is pain at the whole ordeal, if what we saw with Ragatha in the pilot is anything to go off of. Yet even though it may hurt for her to reach out to Jax, she does it anyways. It's all highly memorable, but not in a useless shock and awe sort of way. I even caught my sister humming this song to herself all night after the viewing, and a couple days afterwards as well. What is the harmonica solo in the original piece of music by Stevie Wonder is awesome as well. And suddenly you see a huge jury-rigged grappling hook arm made of Zubo's arms reach out of the void and yank Pomni away before it's too late. Major bump ups for Zubo, who tends to be my least favorite character by far. All the main cast tell Pomni that she shouldn't have thought they were going to let her do this alone, and the rest of the song is spent with characters building a circus tent of their own, to store Jax in the darkness to keep him calm. And this is where I begin to have some problems again. We don't see Jax ever again, except for one last time near the end, as his abstracted form sleeps. I'll expand on my grievances later, but just know for now that Jax's fate does not sit well with me at all, and I think it needs to be handled a little differently. After Jax is put away into the tent, all the characters just kind of hang out on the couches and Gangle runs away, suddenly finding herself able to cry for Jax. Zubul says her thoughts can be complex, but is Gangle crying because she felt like she attempted to help Jax? I don't know. It's never touched on again. Ragatha reaches out to touch Pomni, getting damaged herself, which is a nice sentiment. I think that we can share pain with others, though we don't get to leave unscathed. It's genuinely nice to see the cast scrap together in the desolate circus together and figure out things on their own. Which is why I couldn't believe that stupid chattering teeth head reared his head around the corner. I joked about it before the movie started to my sister, that Kane would come back, but it was a joke. I seriously can't believe Kane was brought back, and it makes me question if this was the best way the movie could have ended. Kane should have remained dead. I can overlook the fact they don't explain why he survived deletion. Maybe he only got sent to the recycling bin or something. However, Kane is portrayed throughout the final parts of the movie as if he is the opposite face of the coin he's sharing with Jax. As if Jax is what happens when you screw up and refuse to forgive yourself, and Kane is what happens when you screw up but you let yourself go on. I'm not buying it, and I don't care how sentient Kane is. He is not based off of a real human. Mind you, he tortured the members of the circus extensively over around the period of a week or longer, and is the sole reason why any of these digital flash consciousnesses exist in the first place, to experience dread at their predicament of not being real people. Sure, Kane may have been hard-coded to create and appease others, but Kane is capable of synthesizing his own non-human AIs, and they're so intelligent that we see that he has to delete them once adventures are over so that he doesn't risk mistaking them for the real humans. Kane is a flawed individual, but it's part of his nature to be flawed, which is tragic. And it was amazing how episode 8 ended with him dying with only a slight whimper. It's a perfect tragic end to someone who is selfish and unable to understand the suffering of others. Even if it's not possible for him to understand humans, which is not true based on what we see for the rest of the film, it does not excuse his actions. We can be dealt tragic hands in life, like with Jax. But Kane also got an intervention from the circus characters, well, in a roundabout way, through Kinger trying to calm him down in his code. But Kane purposefully intervened by cluttering the screen. I might be misremembering, but Kinger basically said to Pomni that not everyone can be saved. So why couldn't have Kane remained dead? Tangent aside for a bit. When we see Kane first in the film, we're immediately thrown back to the void in a flashback of what happened after episode 8. A faceless, mute Bubble is shown floating alongside him, which confirms to me that Bubble's existence is tied to Kane's existence as a merged AI. If I remember correctly, it also heavily alluded to, if not confirmed, that Bubble is the blue AI that Kane, the red AI, initially consumed before the creation of the circus. This makes more sense, as when Kane is monologuing to himself, he starts glitching out with his eyes turning red and blue. This is kind of like the clash of the red and blue AIs, and if we're assuming that Bubble is the blue AI, it's like Bubble whenever she would lash out against Kane's wishes throughout the series or act strangely. Kane eventually comes to the conclusion that he was irresponsible and that he should have dealt with them differently, as the circus characters are uniquely human and come from a world he doesn't understand. I don't see why the blue AI, however, is labeled as the corrupting force, as it was basically enslaved by Kane, who as far as I know is the one who is actually capable of negative emotions like jealousy. Kane eventually comes to the conclusion that he was irresponsible, and that he should have dealt with the circus characters differently. You know, because they're uniquely human and they come from a world he doesn't understand. I don't see why the blue AI in this sequence is labeled as the corrupting force, as it was basically enslaved by Kane throughout the series. And Kane, as far as I know, is the one who's actually capable of negative emotions like jealousy. Kane is the one who seems to get a power trip in episode 8 about being the original AI. It gets worse the more I think about it, as Kane even apologizes to the blue AI when letting it free. It's a horrible crime. Imagine locking someone up in your basement and forcing them to work for you without being able to speak for themselves. It's basically what Kane did. Once the blue AI is removed, why doesn't it lash out if it's supposedly the corrupted one that holds most of the creational power? Is it incapable of emotion, but was actually corrupted by Kane? We never know, because it's just released into the void, Jujutsu Kaisen style, where it's free to do whatever the heck it wants to. Sure, that won't come back to haunt him. Besides Kane's exchanges with the blue AI, the void segment consists of him having a nice reconnection to when he first created the circus, with him sort of pantomiming reaching out to a free Wi-Fi connection in lieu of the original folder containing the mind scans. It's very appealing to the eyes and ears, but the time the sequence took to relay all this to us could have been given to other characters, and Kane could have just remained dead and everything would have been well. If one of the points of the film was to show that sometimes there aren't happy endings and we just need to make the most of what we've got, then why is Kane allowed to come back with no overall consequences, despite doing the most horrible things out of anyone in the cast? Don't forget he knew how to read their mind files to subject them to perfect torture in the ending to episode 8. When Kane finally reveals himself to the circus characters again, none of them even lash out, and the whole thing felt rushed. Why is Zubul, who is usually the most cynical besides Jax, the only one to barely offer a slap on the wrist, saying, "It'll take time for us to trust you again, Kane"? Trust him? You guys never trusted him, and he subjected you to torture. This forgiveness arc for Kane seriously needed more time to even begin to work, and even then I don't know if it would be satisfying for me. Yes, we can forgive those who hurt us a lot, but it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, or within a few sentences for that matter. It's funny too how none of them, not even Kinger, questions how Kane is still alive. I think Zubul even says it's good to have Kane back, or something along those lines. But that's a sentiment that should only be shared once you and Kane have actually had time to work things over, not in your first time seeing him back. Adding on to that, another idea I could see Gooseworks trying to approach with Kane coming back is that maybe the circus members realize they regret their actions in getting Kane killed. But, you know, we all make mistakes after all. However, if Kane remained dead, they could still come to this realization with time, realizing it was wrong of them to not try and sympathize with someone who's not as capable of understanding as a human would. And it would have been even more impactful since he's gone forever. But I digress. I'll finish off the rest of the film before getting into some more gripes. I will comment that it was very heartwarming for the characters to find out about the lives of their respective humans. Even if I would have preferred for Pomni and the crew to find out about the internet connection through the help of Kinger's coding experience instead and their own gumption, like how they took care of Jax themselves. It's also a nice touch that Gooseworks' team made social media accounts for each of the characters. And from what I've seen, they actually exist. I followed the Instagram page and channel that is supposed to be owned by Pomni's character, Abigail Brooks. Even though the YouTube video that is posted on the channel is currently privated, I bet they're saving it for the global release of the film. But yeah, we're revealed. The names are, well, we're revealed all the names of the characters, like Pomni's Abigail Brooks from St. Louis, Missouri. Ragatha is Susie J. Ackerman. Gangle is Zoe Ragavan. Zubul is Riley Versailles, I don't know. And Kinger is Grant Best. But they actually show his wife's name too, technically, because it's his wife's account. So we also know Queenie is Ann Best. Jax's, and I can't believe that they chose his first name to be Leroy. It's Leroy Mathieu. Also, I know it shouldn't be funny, but it's confirmed that Gangle was actually hit by a car. She's my sister's favorite character, so I couldn't help but, poke a little fun at the things she likes. I thought it was a nice sentiment that the circus characters end up rejecting their real human identities and are content to stay as they are, embracing the fact that they're real too. The rest of the movie basically ends with the characters teaching Kane how to be human and adding on to the circus in ways that they see fit. It's super fun and it makes you feel good, but again, it could have been done without Kane. The music is especially nice. It's a rendition of that Your New Home song from the ending of the pilot. And everyone is happily sharing food around the table, like at the end of the pilot too. I don't know if it's meant to mean anything, but the food looks better too, just graphically. It's all such a nice and happy ending. Well, at least that's what Gooseworks wants you to think. First of all, the final moral of the film is muddy to me. Jax is never seen again, and is left to the worst possible fate as someone who literally has no mouth but must scream. I felt like it was hinted that Jax could be saved if he'd forgive himself, and Kane even asked if they want help dealing with him. But I don't know if he meant just send him to the cellar. If he wanted a nice message, why not have had more episodes or a longer film, or even a post-credit scene hinting at Jax coming back? It would have been a nice message to the audience, along with the idea that we need to reach out to others. We need to make a good life out of a bad setting. It would have been good to also say people who are considered irredeemable, they can come back and reconnect with the rest of society. How nice of a message would that have been? But no, Jax is relegated to living in the tent in a tortured form. We're shown earlier that Jax remains a living, sentient being inside the abstracted form, but is trapped without any outside help. But the other circus members seemingly are happy without Jax and live out a good life with him trapped alone. What kind of message does that send? Reach out to people, but if it gets too hard, let them wallow in despair forever? How horrid. And what about all the other abstracted humans? Sure, let's just assume Jax is a lost cause. But why are all the other abstractions left alone in that weird aquarium setting that Kinger's watching? Surely some of the abstracted characters could attempt to reach out to them, especially with Kane being able to snap away all the pain. Kinger doesn't even try to help Queenie from what we've seen, despite those two probably having the greatest likelihood of saving her. But the series is over, so that ship sailed. And with that, most of the movie has been covered, at least the major portions. So the rest of the video will be just some additional thoughts from the ending sequence and end credits. First, why did the Glowinks make an appearance to show that non-human AIs are still a possibility in the circus, but not Gummy Goo? Gummy Goo and Pomni have a huge connection. It's weird that we never see him again, despite how much Pomni wishes to. I just felt like that was just some lost potential there. He doesn't even need to talk, he just needs to show up. The carnival part of the circus is never explored, though that doesn't matter that much in the scheme of things, because they end up building their own worlds, I guess, attached to the circus. Also, that Oni plays fish from the beginning is literally killed and eaten by the circus members. So that's haunting, and he's definitely just dead forever. I will admit that I waved back dumbly at that ending scene where Pomni waves towards the audience. But it got a laugh out of my sister, so it was worth it. Also, we never end up figuring out what Gangle did with that anime figure of Ragatha or whatever, or the jar, so yeah. I guess we just know that Gangle's a freak. Especially as they just openly reveal Gangle and Zubul having sex in the credits. Like, I guess, bro. The fun police part of me wonders how the Amazing Digital Circus still exists. Cain and Abel is supposedly a defunct company, or at least the facility that hosts the computer with Cain on it is abandoned, if that's how Pomni discovered it. But if that's the case, why is there still electricity being supplied to the building? Or how did no one discover this program stuff and shut it all down? Surely when Ragatha was doing real estate, she would have sold this place and everything been thrown out, right? It's just really weird and improbable. If I were the circus members, this is what I would have been scared about, is just someone unplugging the program and all of us just ceasing to exist. Maybe they could have contacted Grant Best in the credits or something through the internet. That would have been a fun thought, but you know, it didn't happen. Also, I thought I would throw in that they did a post-credits scene showing all the human characters. And it's weird because the audience isn't attached to any of the real humans. You know, because we've been watching the circus characters the entire time. But whatever. I got to crack a joke to my sister that now we know who Pomni is in real life. And that she better watch out for all the fans trying to find her. Overall, the Amazing Digital Circus The Last Act was a fantastic product that was bogged down by the fact that it could have been so much better if the series was just given more time to breathe, or just have more episodes. You know, filler episodes aren't always a bad thing. It would have been awesome to have had the flash drive clone copies reveal have been its own episode, and all the stuff with Cain have been its own episode. The series could have leaned heavier into the horror aspects that its source material is based on. You know, I Have No Mouth, I'm a Scream. And we all know Glitch would have done it too and made oodles of more cash. But alas, I know the creator Gooseworks really wants nothing to do with the fan base. And I assume the series as a whole anymore. I'm not really keyed into why she is upset with the fan base, but knowing other online communities, I think I get the general idea. Anyways, congratulations to the team at Glitch Productions, you know, for throwing this whole series together. I don't want any amazing physical garbage collecting dust on my shelves, so I never bought any of the merch. Consider me going to the movies to be my support for this series. Also, Glitch, I'm not buying that overpriced Pomni badge. When I was in the theater, the audience was all audibly checking the link at the end. You know, that was the special early access merch. And one dude just screamed, "Dude, I could get the Pomni pin," to his friend. That was good stuff. Before ending the video, I'd like to let loose some of my miscellaneous ideas concerning the series that wouldn't have had any other place to be outside this video. Feel free to click off if you aren't interested. While making this video, Fortnite announced a collab with the Amazing Digital Circus, which is just all sorts of odd. How are we releasing a comedic collab right after what was intended to be a crushing and emotional movie? And why does Pomni look like something I'd see from a YouTube content farm? I think I also heard that Jax's back bling is Ribbit, which is bizarre if you consider the fact that in the film he essentially drove her to conceptual suicide. I don't know what they're thinking on that one. When I was abroad in Japan, I found out that I guess the Japanese really love this series. There were tons of stores carrying Digital Circus merch, which was crazy for me since I thought the series was only for terminally online losers. But a simple Google search of Japan Digital Circus brings up a bunch of pop-up events I didn't even know existed. There's even full arcade machines and everything. I think they even got like a pop-up cafe or something. I'm not sure. What I do know is that I saw my goat Kinger in real life, which was pretty cool. The cosplay scene is pretty insane in Japan. I know you're supposed to, or you're not supposed to post pictures of people from Japan without their consent. But no faces or identifying features are shown here, so I'll just assume it's okay. Sorry that this video is a departure from what has seemingly been my regular content. I don't really know what to do with this channel anymore, so I'll just post what I want. So I hope you enjoyed my takes, and even if you didn't, well, have a great day.
Isn't she fun?